Prince Henry's interest in overseas expansion extended beyond the Moroccan conquests and the defense of Ceuta. As early as 1416, he had received a royal commission to ensure the city's supply and protection, and in 1419, he arrived with reinforcements to break the siege laid by Muslim forces. This strengthened his connection to Morocco and established him as a kind of guardian of Ceuta abroad. This responsibility, along with his vested interest in the naval warfare conducted by his fleet, likely contributed to his turn toward the sea and exploration. That same year, 1419, marked a new phase in overseas expansion with the discovery of the island of Porto Santo by Juan Gonçalves Zarco and Tristão Vaz Teixeira, two of Henry's squires returning from aiding in Ceuta's defense. This discovery, though somewhat accidental and following failed attempts to control the Canary Islands, opened up new possibilities. In 1420, the island of Madeira was discovered by Bartolomeu Perestrello, this time under the service of Prince John, Henry's brother, and efforts to settle these islands began soon after, further emphasizing a maritime expansion that was no longer centered solely on Morocco. From the early 1420s, Prince Henry began organizing expeditions down the West African coast with the goal of rounding Cape Boyador, a feat finally achieved in 1434 by Gil Ienes. In Chapter 7 of his Chronicle of Guinea, Gomes Ienes de Zurara, a staunch admirer of Prince Henry, listed 5 reasons for the prince's dedication to Atlantic exploration. He begins by noting that since the conquest of Ceuta, Henry had consistently maintained a fleet against the Muslims, an implicit reference to the need to protect the city and to engage in maritime raids near the Mediterranean. Zurara then outlines Henry's motivations. First, a desire to discover the lands beyond the Canary Islands and Cape Boyador. Second, the hope of finding Christian allies or safe ports for trade, which he believed would benefit the kingdom by providing goods at favorable prices. And third, the intention to better understand the strength of Islamic powers in those African regions. The fourth reason mentioned was that Prince Henry had never found an ally within Christendom willing to join him in his war against Islam. Because of this, he hoped to discover whether any Christian ruler in Africa might be inclined to support him in that cause. Lastly, the fifth reason was the desire to spread the Christian faith, aiming to convert all the souls that wished to be saved. This explanation presents a coherent vision of Prince Henry's actions, although such coherence is shaped by the chronicler in hindsight. Zurara was writing around 1452 to 1453, with possible additions after 1460, the year of the Navigator's death. His account was also apologetic in tone, portraying Henry as a heroic figure. Still, the combination of curiosity about the African coast and the intent to explore any commercial opportunities that might arise seems entirely logical, even if those economic benefits only began to materialize some years after the initial expeditions launched under Henry's command. As for understanding the true extent of Muslim power and seeking potential Christian allies in the conflict against them, this reflects the widespread belief in the existence of the legendary kingdom of Prester John. Initially imagined to be in Asia, this mythical realm was by then associated with Ethiopia, whose supposed borders were thought to stretch as far as the Atlantic Ocean. The fight against the enemies of the Christian faith and the mission to convert souls were both fundamental to the Christian proselytizing worldview. These goals were perfectly aligned with crusading ideals that Prince Henry had clearly embraced and pursued with conviction. Furthermore, his plans for maritime exploration and the continued conquest of Moroccan territory after Ceuta were not seen as opposing or unrelated efforts. Rather, they were part of a unified strategy. By finding allies south of Morocco, it might be possible to encircle Muslim lands, attacking the Kingdom of Fez from both north and south, and thereby increasing the chances of victory. It is not surprising, then, that Henry was determined to hold on to Ceuta even after the disastrous outcome at Tangier, for which he bore personal responsibility, and continued to seek further conquests in North Africa, while simultaneously sponsoring expeditions along the West African coast. These two aspects of Portuguese expansion, territorial gains in Morocco and Atlantic exploration, would later diverge, but at the time, especially in Henry's eyes, they formed part of the same broader vision. This integrated approach is even reflected in the papal bull granted to him in 1443, which supported both the war against non-Christian aggressors and the settlement of newly discovered Atlantic islands. Nonetheless, the challenge of sailing past Cape Bojador, something not achieved until 1434, and the difficulties in establishing contact with the local populations delayed the possibility of regular trade along the Mauritanian coast. It was only in 1441 that the first true commercial venture took place, resulting in the transport to Portugal of some gold and various exotic items, such as ostrich eggs. From then on, privateering and commercial pursuits became intertwined. This combination created multiple avenues for generating substantial income. This development soon encouraged private individuals to take an interest in voyages beyond Cape Bojador. In 1446, the first such privately organized expedition was launched from the port of Lagos. It was led by a former squire of Prince Henry, someone likely well acquainted with the maritime expeditions the prince had sponsored. Among the 6 caravels that set sail was one carrying Gil Eanes, the very navigator who had first rounded Cape Bojador. The voyage proved successful. Perhaps anticipating potential competition, Prince Henry took steps to protect his economic interests. In 1443, he secured from his brother, Prince Pedro, who was serving as regent, exclusive rights over all commercial and privateering activities conducted beyond Cape Bojador. In addition, Henry was granted the right to claim 1/5 of all goods brought back from those ventures, a share that would normally have gone to the crown. Private expeditions to those regions also required the prince's explicit permission, and even then, he retained his right to 1/5 of whatever was brought back to Portugal. In this way, Henry ensured he maintained both control and financial benefit from exploration along the African coast. He continued either to organize such expeditions himself or to collect royalties from private voyages that followed the same routes. Voyages to the area referred to as the Land of the Blacks, so named to distinguish it from Berber and Mauritanian territories, and the arrival at the Guinea coast in 1444 spurred an increase in privately armed ships, all operating with Prince Henry's authorization. From 1445 onward, around 2/3 of the ships headed to Guinea were privately owned, while only about 1/3 belonged directly to the prince. Prince Henry amassed a vast estate. What made his holdings particularly notable was their distribution across the mainland. He was, after all, Duke of Viseu and head of one of the wealthiest noble houses in the kingdom, as well as administrator of the Order of Christ, the Atlantic Islands, and the rights he held over trade and exploration along the African coast. This triangular network of interests greatly amplified his income. The people under his lordship made up the crews of the fleets that sailed the seas. The wheat grown in Madeira was shipped to Africa and exchanged for Sudanese gold that flowed into the trading post of Arguin. A nobleman of the highest rank, Duke of Viseu and member of the royal family, Prince Henry did not distance himself from commercial ventures. In fact, these activities were a vital source of his wealth. He clearly exemplifies, at the highest level, that nobility and commerce were not mutually exclusive. Following Henry's death in 1460, the situation shifted. In 1469, the crown leased trade with parts of Africa to Fernão Gomes, a merchant from Lisbon, though the most important areas belonged to the crown. It was during the rule of Afonso V that much of the Gulf of Guinea was explored, including the highly significant Gold Coast and the region of Elmina, a major source of the precious metal long sought after by the Portuguese. However, King Afonso I's intervention in Castile during the War of Succession in 1475 to 1476 interrupted the crown's ability to pursue its overseas policies and stalled the progression of Atlantic exploration. It was only under the reign of King Jerome II, beginning in 1481, that these initiatives were revived, with renewed determination and clear strategic planning.